Imagine walking into your business on a Monday morning, only to find one of your oldest, most troublesome employees smiling at you like nothing happened, when you already have written proof that she just quit. Now imagine the look on her face when you hand her a box of her belongings, tell her she's officially retired, and watch her scream, "But I didn't retire," as the police escort her out. Yeah, this is that story. If you've ever worked with someone who twists every rule, lies through their teeth, and somehow always avoids consequences, you're going to love what happens here. Hit that like button, subscribe, and buckle up, because this is one of the most legally satisfying revenge stories you'll hear today. British Columbia has a very particular kind of quiet. It's not the silence of empty places, it's the calm hum of a community where everybody knows who drives which car, who owns which store, and who always has a fresh pot of coffee brewing behind the counter. In a small seaside town, tucked between thick pine forests and the cool edge of the Pacific, Set Harbor breeze travel, a modest storefront with blue shutters, a bell on the door, and the smell of sunscreen and printer ink lingering in the air. For years, the business was owned by an older woman named Maggie, a soft-spoken lady with glasses always perched halfway down her nose. She had 3 employees, a bright newcomer named Sandy, another dependable employee named Kim, and then there was Jane. Jane, the storm cloud hiding behind a polite smile. From the outside, Jane seemed harmless. She was in her early to mid-60s, silver curls pinned neatly, sweaters with cats embroidered on them, and a habit of bringing muffins to the office on Mondays. To a stranger, she might look like the sweet grandmotherly type, the kind who knits scarves for her neighbors. But inside the office, inside that tight 3-person workspace, Jane was a nightmare wrapped in knitwear. She was the kind of employee who could weaponize innocence. She'd tilt her head, sigh dramatically, and make herself look like a fragile little daisy who just needed an extra afternoon off, or a little flexibility, or a tiny bit of understanding. But her little requests, they always snowballed into chaos. From the moment Sandy started working there, she noticed the pattern. Jane would walk in on a Monday morning with a tragic expression, like she'd survived a shipwreck. "Oh dear," she'd say, "I must take Thursday off. My hip, it's acting up again." Or, "I simply must stay home tomorrow. My daughter needs me. She's going through something personal. I can't say more." It was always vague, always unverifiable, and always timed perfectly to inconvenience everyone else. But Jane had a second trick, one more subtle and far more infuriating. Whenever she took a day off officially or unofficially, she would magically claim that she had come in after hours to catch up. And since the office door used a simple key lock, there was no way to verify her claims. She would casually hand Maggie a time card with scrawled additions, extra 2 hours on Saturday evening, finished bookings for Smith family, 1.5 hours Sunday, finalized itinerary for client number 237. Nobody asked her to do overtime. Nobody needed her to do overtime. But she claimed it anyway. And Maggie always paid it. Partly because she was old-fashioned, partly because she was non-confrontational, and partly because Jane had a reputation, a dangerous one. After Jane was hired, Maggie discovered that Jane had been fired from another local travel agency for surprise false overtime claims, secret time off, disappearing acts, and lying about work. But what mattered more? Jane had sued them, and she had won. The moment Maggie heard that, she understood something chilling. If she fired Jane, she risked the same lawsuit. So Jane continued her routine. She lied, schemed, stole time, manipulated sympathy, took random days off, claimed fake overtime, and coasted through the job, earning more than both of her coworkers, purely through dishonesty. For Sandy, watching this unfold was maddening. She was young, hardworking, a single mom of 2 boys, and determined to build stability. She'd show up early, leave late, and pour her energy into every task. Meanwhile, Jane floated around like a self-appointed queen of the workplace. And every time Sandy tried to bring it up, Maggie would give a helpless shrug. "What can I do? I can't risk being sued again." So Sandy swallowed her frustration. Day after day, week after week, year after year. She needed the job. She needed the income. She needed the stability for her boys. But the resentment simmered quietly. After a few years, a bombshell hit, but in the best possible way. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, Maggie invited Sandy into her small office, closing the door gently behind her. She sat down, looking tired but relieved. "Sandy," she said, folding her hands, "I'm ready to retire." Sandy blinked. "Are you selling the business?" Maggie nodded. And then, unbelievably, "I want you to buy it." Sandy was stunned, speechless. She had never imagined becoming a business owner, not yet, not with 2 kids, not with her finances always stretched thin between hockey gear and groceries. But Maggie trusted her, believed in her, wanted the business to go to someone who cared. After long talks with an accountant, plans for financing, and many sleepless nights, Sandy bought Harbor Breeze Travel. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt power, real power, the ability to shape her workplace, the ability to change things. But one thing she didn't change, one thing she felt she couldn't change was Jane, because even as a business owner, Sandy feared the same thing Maggie did, the lawsuit. On her first day as owner, Sandy called a small meeting. She stood in the tiny break area, clutching a stack of printouts with her new company guidelines. Kim was supportive. Jane? Jane sat with her arms folded, lips pursed like she was sucking on lemons. Sandy announced, "No overtime whatsoever without explicit written authorization. Time off must be requested in person and approved in advance. No more disappearing without notice. No more unverified after-hours work. All client information must be entered into the central computer system." Jane didn't say much, but her eyes narrowed. She saw it as an attack on her freedom, her special privilege. And she wasn't going to give up her little tricks easily. The no overtime rule shut down her biggest scam. So Jane adapted like a cockroach surviving nuclear fallout. Whenever Sandy left early to take her boys to hockey practice, Jane would pounce on the opportunity. The moment Sandy was out of the office, ping, a new email would arrive. "Hi, Sandy, I won't be coming in tomorrow. Something has come up." No explanation. No request. Just a declaration. By the time Sandy saw it in the morning, it was too late to argue. And firing Jane over it? Still too risky. But surprisingly, this tactic didn't bother Sandy much. Because under the new rules, Jane got no overtime to make up for missed hours. Jane lost a day's pay. Sandy saved money, and the remaining 2 employees could handle everything. Sandy almost started to prefer when Jane didn't show up. But Jane still believed she was untouchable, still believed she could bend the rules anytime she wanted, still believed she could manipulate everyone. She had no clue her downfall was approaching, and that it would be her own ego that delivered the final blow. One day, Sandy gathered her employees and made a clear, strict announcement. "I will be away for 2 days next month. It's the boys' hockey tournament. I need you both here. No exceptions. No time off requests for those dates. I'm telling you now, verbally and in writing." She printed the memo. She emailed it to both employees. She even taped a copy to the staff corkboard. Kim nodded, smiling. Jane forced a stiff, polite smile. But her eyes, they said, "We'll see about that," because Jane believed she was smarter than the rules, smarter than her boss, smarter than everyone, and she just couldn't resist proving it. A few days later, Sandy went into the office on a Saturday alone, with sunlight streaming through the big front window. The street outside was quiet, only the distant call of seagulls and the occasional passing car. She sat at her desk, sipping lukewarm coffee, and opened the booking database to review the week's sales. At first, everything looked normal. Then she saw it. A new booking made just the day before. A trip for Jane's daughter and son-in-law to Las Vegas, departing on the exact days Sandy would be gone. Her eyebrows scrunched. She clicked the next file. A second booking. A plane ticket. For Jane herself. To Calgary. Also on the exact same days. The ones Sandy explicitly made unavailable. Sandy froze. Her jaw tightened. Her heartbeat quickened in a hot, pulsing rhythm of disbelief and instant fury. Jane hadn't just broken the rules. She had brazenly, deliberately thumbed her nose at them. And the worst part? Jane had booked everything using company systems. During paid work hours under Sandy's nose. It was arrogance on full display. A slap in the face. A declaration. "I do what I want, and you can't stop me." But this time, she'd gone too far. And Sandy had the proof in her hands. A slow, electric realization spread through Sandy's chest like the first spark of a fuse being lit. This might finally be the moment she'd been waiting for. Sandy stared at the screen for a long moment, her coffee cooling beside her untouched. The details were undeniable. The dates aligned perfectly. The bookings were processed under Jane's user login, and the paperwork was right there in the system, time-stamped and stored. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't even Jane forgetting the rules. It was pure, calculated defiance. For a moment, Sandy wasn't just angry, she felt disappointed. Disappointed in herself for ever letting Jane get away with the earlier nonsense. Disappointed that despite everything she'd improved since taking over the business, Jane still believed she could operate like it was her own personal playground. But then the disappointment hardened into something stronger. A quiet, determined resolve. Sandy sat up straighter, rolled her shoulders back, and clicked open her email. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wasn't going to explode. Not yet. Not emotionally, anyway. She was going to document. She typed, subject, time off for dates redacted. Hi, Jane. I'm writing to confirm that I cannot approve your time off for dates. As stated previously, these dates were already marked unavailable due to my being away and needing both employees present in the office. Regards, Sandy. Short, professional, direct. She hit send. Then she waited, because she knew Jane would respond, and that response would be exactly what she needed. The reply came within 15 minutes. A long, dramatic email filled with excuses. Sandy, I'm surprised and hurt. I only requested those days because my daughter is having an urgent medical procedure in Calgary. I need to be there to help care for my granddaughter for a few days. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Sandy actually snorted out loud. A medical emergency? Really? Jane had literally booked her daughter a Vegas vacation the day before. There was nothing urgent about blackjack tables and neon lights. Sandy exhaled deeply, her frustration sharpening her focus. She replied, Jane, I am aware of the loss. Vegas trip you booked for your daughter and son-in-law for those dates. I'm also aware of the plane ticket you booked for yourself to Calgary for the same dates. It appears the Calgary trip is for childcare while they are away. These dates were clearly marked unavailable for time off. The request cannot be approved. Clear, cold, objective. She didn't accuse. She stated facts. And she waited again. Jane's next message appeared in the inbox like a thunderclap. Sandy, I've been a loyal employee here for years. I've given so much to this business, more than you know. I'm shocked to be treated this unfairly. If this is how you see me, then I have no choice but to retire. Consider this my 2 weeks' notice. Sandy didn't even blink. There it was. The words she'd been too afraid to dream of. I have no choice but to retire. Consider this my 2 weeks' notice. For years, Sandy had been powerless. Too scared of the legal fallout to confront Jane. Too burdened by the fear of losing the business she worked so hard for. But now, Jane had handed over the perfect escape. A self-written resignation. Sandy didn't reply with emotion. She didn't beg her to reconsider. Didn't acknowledge the theatrics. She typed, understood. However, the time off request remains denied. She hit send. Then she leaned back in her chair, and a slow, incredulous smile crept across her face. This was it. The silent click of the first domino. Still, Sandy didn't want to assume anything. She called her accountant, a numbers guy with icy calm and the strategic mind of a chess player. She explained everything. The bookings, the emails, the lie, the retirement threat, every detail. He listened quietly. Then he said something that made Sandy's breath catch. Sandy, he said, this is the opening you've been waiting for. He continued, you have it all in writing. She wasn't fired. She voluntarily resigned. Legally, you're in the clear. You only need to give her 2 weeks. Pay either by letting her finish or paying her out. No severance. No lawsuit. Sandy blinked. No lawsuit. She repeated, needing to hear it again. No lawsuit, he confirmed firmly. She gave notice. It's her own wording. You simply accept the retirement she offered. Sandy felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She hadn't realized she'd been carrying so heavily. For the first time since buying the business, she felt free. And for the first time since meeting Jane, she felt powerful. Sandy didn't sleep much that weekend. Not out of stress, out of preparation. She woke early Monday morning before dawn, her heart buzzing with a mix of nervousness and adrenaline. She wasn't a confrontational person. She didn't like conflict, but she knew what had to be done. She had the emails printed. She had Jane's retirement notice highlighted. She had the check for 2 weeks' wages written out. And she had a witness, her long-term boyfriend. He offered to stand by her side, not to intimidate, but to protect her legally, to ensure Jane couldn't rewrite the narrative later. They drove to the office in the pale early morning light, the streets still quiet, the town barely waking up. Sandy unlocked the front door, the bell chiming softly as they entered. The office felt different today, heavier, as if holding its breath. Kim arrived a few minutes later, giving Sandy a nervous but supportive nod when she saw the box on the counter. A box filled with Jane's belongings. Her potted plant, her framed photos, her knickknacks, the cat-themed mug she used every day. But one thing was missing: the small wooden index card box, the one she guarded like a treasure chest, the one she used instead of the computer system, the one filled with handwritten client data names, addresses, credit card numbers. That box was company property, and it was illegal for Jane to keep. Sandy had hidden it in the locked back office cabinet. Everything was ready. Now they just had to wait. At 8:56 a.m., the bell over the door jingled. Jane walked in like it was any other Monday morning. Bright smile, casual jacket, purse slung over her shoulder. "Good morning," she chimed, her voice light, cheerful, almost falsely sweet. But then her steps slowed. Her eyes flickered toward the far corner of the office, toward Sandy's boyfriend sitting quietly with his arms folded. Something flickered across her face: confusion, worry, maybe even guilt, but she masked it quickly. She continued toward her desk. But before she got halfway, Sandy spoke. "Jane," she said calmly, "you don't need to go any further." Jane stopped, turned, blinking in confusion. Sandy continued, her voice steady. "I've accepted your notice of retirement." Jane froze literally, her entire body stiffened. Her eyebrows knit together. Her smile evaporated. "What?" she whispered. Sandy stepped closer and handed her the envelope. "Here is your final pay, your remaining hours, and 2 weeks' wages, in lieu of you working your notice period." Jane stared at the check like it was written in a foreign language. But I didn't retire," she sputtered. Sandy didn't flinch. "Yes," she said calmly, "you did. You put it in writing." Jane's face twisted in confusion, then outrage. No, Sandy, I didn't mean it. I was upset. I was emotional. I didn't mean I was actually retiring." Sandy gestured to the printed emails. "You submitted your retirement, and I accepted it." The shock hit Jane like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed, like she was gasping for air. "I'm not ready to retire," she cried, voice climbing in pitch. "I never said I wanted to retire. This is unfair." But Sandy didn't move, didn't react, didn't soften. "Jane," she said quietly, "you made the choice, and it's in writing." Jane spun around, desperate, looking to Kim for support. Kim, tell her. Tell her I didn't retire. Tell her she can't do this." Kim stared at her blankly. I can't help you," she said softly. Jane's panic only intensified. She lunged toward the box of her belongings, then rifled through it aggressively. "Where is IT?" she demanded. "Where's my box?" "My client cards." "Where did you put them?" Sandy's jaw set. "They're not yours. They're company property, and they contain private client information. You can't take them home." Jane's shock turned to fury. "They're mine. I wrote them. I kept them for years. And they contain customer addresses and credit card numbers," Sandy said. "You are not legally allowed to possess them." Jane shook her head violently. No, I'm not leaving without them." Sandy remained calm, but her boyfriend and Kim were visibly tense. "Jane," Sandy said sternly, "please collect your belongings and leave." But Jane didn't. She crossed her arms, planted her feet, and refused to move. "I'm not leaving," she snapped. "Not without my box." That's when Sandy spoke the words she had hoped she wouldn't have to say. "If you don't leave, we'll have to call the RCMP." And without hesitation, her boyfriend picked up the phone and dialed. When the officers arrived minutes later, the tension cracked open like a thunderstorm. Jane ran to the front door the moment they stepped in. "She fired me," she shrieked. "And she stole my personal box." One officer took her outside to calm her down and get her version. The other stayed inside to talk to Sandy. Sandy explained everything calmly, factually, with printed evidence. The officer nodded. Repeatedly. "Yeah," he said, "those cards legally belong to the business. She can't take client data home." The officers walked back outside, carrying the large box of Jane's belongings, the permitted ones. "Ma'am," one said, "you need to go home now." Jane's face crumpled into disbelief. "No, I'm not leaving. They stole my—" "Ma'am," the officer cut in gently but firmly, "you need to go." Her voice broke. "But I didn't retire," she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't retire, but she had no choice." The officers escorted her away from the building, and the bell rang one final time as the door shut behind her. As days passed in the village house, everything seemed almost normal on the surface, but tension was slowly building beneath it. Samantha tried her best to adjust to life in Daniel's family home, thinking that maybe if she showed kindness, respect, and effort, they would soften toward her. She cooked when she could, cleaned up after meals, offered help to Daniel's mother, and never complained, not even once. She believed that love could win people over. She believed that patience and purity of heart could melt cold expressions. But she was wrong. Very wrong. The mother-in-law's coldness intensified, no longer subtle and no longer hidden. The first sign came one morning. Samantha woke up early, made tea for everyone, and gently placed a cup near her mother-in-law's door. As she turned away, she heard footsteps. She turned back to find the older woman staring at the tea with disgust, as if Samantha had placed poison instead of kindness. Without a word, the cup was pushed aside and the door slammed. Samantha stood still, confused, hurt, but quiet. Later that day, during lunch, Samantha reached for the salt. It slipped from her hand, falling lightly on the table. A small, harmless mistake, but the reaction was anything but small. The mother-in-law snapped sharply, accusing Samantha of being careless, disrespectful, and unfit to be part of their family. Daniel sat there silently, eyes lowered, not defending Samantha, not supporting her, only watching as if it wasn't his fight. That silence hurt Samantha more than the insult itself. Then came the controlling behavior. The mother-in-law began inspecting everything Samantha touched: the dishes, the bedding, the clothes, searching for faults. If Samantha washed clothes, she claimed they weren't clean enough. If she swept the floor, she claimed there was dust left. If she cooked, she claimed the food was tasteless. Samantha started doubting herself, thinking maybe she wasn't doing things right. Maybe the problem was her. But deep inside, she sensed the truth. Nothing she did would ever be good enough for someone who had already decided to hate her. The whispering began next. Samantha noticed how the mother-in-law would pull Daniel aside, speaking in hushed tones, casting glances toward Samantha. Some nights, Daniel returned to their room looking distant, irritated, and cold. He would complain about meaningless things like the way Samantha placed clothes in the cupboard, or how she arranged the bedding. Criticisms that sounded exactly like his mother's voice repeating through him. Slowly, Daniel was slipping away from her, influenced not by logic but by manipulation. One evening, the mother-in-law created a scene so unnecessary and dramatic, it left Samantha shaking. Samantha had prepared dinner: simple, warm, freshly cooked food. As everyone sat, the mother-in-law took one bite and abruptly spat it out, acting as if the food was rotten. She claimed Samantha intentionally cooked badly to disrespect her. She complained loudly, her voice echoing through the small courtyard, accusing Samantha of being a bad wife, a burden, and a disappointment. Neighbors peeked over their walls. Daniel's siblings watched from a distance. And Daniel, he stood by his mother, allowing Samantha to take the blame. That night, Samantha cried silently, holding herself in the dark room. She tried not to make a sound. She didn't want to show weakness. She didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. But the emotional weight was crushing her chest. Every tear carried disappointment and betrayal, not just from her mother-in-law, but from the man who promised to stand by her. The escalation didn't stop. It only grew sharper. The next morning, Samantha found that her phone was missing. When she asked where it was, no one answered. Later, she overheard her mother-in-law telling a neighbor that Samantha didn't deserve to use a phone, that she shouldn't be talking to anyone outside. It was an attempt to isolate her, to cut her off from the world. Samantha felt trapped, like a bird locked inside, a cage where even her voice wasn't allowed to reach beyond the walls. Then, one afternoon, the mother-in-law accused Samantha of stealing money from a drawer Samantha never even opened. There was no evidence, no logic, no reason, just a dramatic accusation, loud enough for half the street to hear. Daniel returned home angry, believing his mother instantly. He didn't ask Samantha. He didn't question anything. He simply blamed her, raising his voice, calling her selfish, irresponsible, and untrustworthy. Samantha stood there motionless, staring at Daniel with disbelief. The man she had married, the man she loved, was now looking at her like a stranger. She tried to explain, but her voice was drowned out by shouting. In that moment, something inside her began to shatter, not loudly, not visibly, but quietly, deeply, permanently. The worst moment came one stormy evening. The rain poured heavily, and the house felt colder than usual. Samantha had a slight fever and was shivering. but she still helped in the kitchen. As she served dinner, her hands trembling from weakness, she accidentally spilled a few drops of curry on the floor. The mother-in-law erupted instantly, shouting at her with more venom than ever before. She called Samantha a curse, claiming she brought misfortune into the family. She told Samantha she was worthless, unwanted, and a mistake. Daniel didn't defend her. Not even once. He simply walked away, leaving Samantha standing there, feverish, exhausted, humiliated. That night, Samantha lay awake, coughing softly, staring at the ceiling. The walls felt like they were closing in on her. She realized something she had never dared to accept. Before, these people did not want her there. They never did. And they would never stop, no matter how kind, loving, or patient she tried to be. For the first time, the thought of leaving crossed her mind. Not leaving temporarily, not leaving for a break, leaving permanently. Walking away from the marriage she had given her heart to. Walking away from the home that was never truly hers. The conflict had grown beyond insults or coldness. It had grown into emotional abuse, mental manipulation, isolation, a slow, painful destruction of her spirit. And though Samantha hadn't made a decision yet, something inside her had awakened. A quiet strength, a spark, a realization that she deserved better and that this house, this family, this marriage was becoming a prison. And prisons are not meant to be lived in forever. Samantha didn't wake up one morning suddenly stronger or braver. Strength doesn't appear with a dramatic sound or a heroic rise. It grows quietly, forming piece by piece through pain, disappointment, and the slow death of hope. And Samantha had reached that point where hope no longer lived, in the corners of that house. The breaking point came in layers, not all at once. It began on a quiet afternoon. The sky was clear, the air warm, and the village filled with its usual sounds, children laughing, women gossiping from rooftops, birds resting on electric wires. But inside the house, silence felt heavy. Samantha was folding clothes when she heard her mother-in-law's voice calling Daniel into the next room. At first, Samantha ignored it. She was used to secret conversations. But something in the tone sharp, urgent made her pause. She leaned slightly closer, not to spy, but because her heart demanded to know the truth. She heard her name, followed by the cruelest words she could ever imagine. "She's not a good wife," the mother-in-law whispered harshly. "She's a burden, Daniel. She's ruining our house. She's not fit for you. You married the wrong girl." Samantha froze. Her chest tightened. Her hands stopped mid-fold. But the next line, that line destroyed whatever hope was left inside her. "End it," the mother-in-law hissed. "Send her back. Divorce her. We'll find someone better." For a moment, Samantha forgot how to breathe. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Her vision blurred. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just hatred. This was a plan. They weren't just trying to hurt her. They were trying to erase her from the family altogether. She waited for Daniel's response, praying he would defend her, even in the smallest way. But his answer landed like a knife. "Maybe you're right." Simple words. Soft voice. Deadly impact. Samantha felt something collapse inside her. Not her heart. He had broken that long ago. But her belief in their marriage. Her belief that love could overcome anything. Her belief that Daniel would stand by her. He wouldn't. He never would. She stepped back from the door, her legs weak. She wanted to scream, cry, or burst into the room and ask him why, but she couldn't. Her strength had drained slowly over weeks, and now it was gone completely. She walked to her room and sat on the floor. Not on the bed, just the floor. It felt cold, hard, unforgiving. Exactly like the life she was living. She tried to gather her thoughts, but everything inside her was chaos. The world felt blurry, like she was underwater. Tears came quietly, without warning, rolling down her cheeks with no resistance. She didn't fight them anymore. She whispered to herself, "What did I do to deserve this? What else do they want from me?" There was no answer. Even the walls refused to comfort her. Hours passed. The sun began to set. The house grew darker. And in that darkness, Samantha felt something shift. Not rage, not yet. Not revenge, not yet. But clarity. A painful, undeniable clarity. She realized she was alone in a house full of people. She realized love meant nothing to those who had no hearts. She realized she had been trying to save a marriage that Daniel himself was preparing to end. And then came the final blow, the moment that sealed her decision forever. That same evening, while she sat quietly in the corner of her room, Daniel entered. His expression was cold, distant, already halfway out of the marriage. He didn't sit near her. He didn't soften his tone. He simply stood in the doorway and said, "Stop telling people our problems. Stop making my mother upset. Just do as she says." Samantha looked up slowly. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, her heart shattered. She whispered, "What have I done wrong?" Daniel shrugged. "Everything," he replied casually, and turned away. Everything. The word echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. She had given everything love, effort, respect, kindness. And yet, somehow, she was to blame for everything. That night, Samantha didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dim lamp, her mind silent. No more tears. No more questions. No more begging for love. Something inside her had changed permanently. She was done. Done being a punching bag. Done being the outsider in her own marriage. Done trying to please people who wanted her gone. Done sacrificing her peace for someone who wouldn't lift a finger for her. By the time the first morning light touched the floor, Samantha had made her decision. She wasn't going to stay. She wasn't going to endure another insult. She wasn't going to let them break her soul piece by piece. And for the first time, a new feeling rose inside her chest, not fear, not sadness, but strength. And beneath that strength, quietly burning like a spark hidden under ashes, revenge. Not the loud, dramatic type. No, a carefully planned revenge. A silent, intelligent revenge. A revenge that wouldn't just hurt them emotionally, but expose their cruelty to everyone. Samantha stood up slowly, wiped her face, and breathed deeply. This wasn't the end for her. This was the end for them. Revenge doesn't always begin with fury. Sometimes it begins with silence. And that's exactly how Samantha started hers. Not with shouting. Not with accusing. Not with running away. No, her revenge began the moment she stopped reacting. For the first time since entering that house, she didn't cry when insulted. She didn't look down when spoken to harshly. She didn't scramble to fix a situation she didn't even cause. She simply watched, observed, prepared. Because now she knew one thing with absolute clarity. These people were willing to destroy her life. And she was no longer afraid of destroying their lives. The next morning, Samantha acted like nothing had happened. She made breakfast. She set the table. She moved around the house with a calmness that confused everyone, especially Daniel's mother. There were no tears, no attempts to please, no nervousness, just a quiet, steady presence. Her mother-in-law frowned. Women like her lived off reactions. They fed on tears, fear, and weakness. And Samantha had removed all three from her energy. When the mother-in-law snapped at her for putting too much sugar in tea, Samantha replied softly, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll fix it." No emotion, no fight, just calm. But inside her mind, she was storing everything like ammunition for a war only she knew was coming. Daniel noticed the shift too. He wasn't used to her silence. He wasn't used to her indifference. Guilt wasn't something he handled well. He asked awkwardly, "You okay?" She smiled gently. Of course, it wasn't the smile of a scared wife. It was the smile of someone who already knew how this story would end and who would win. Revenge is sweetest when it's backed by proof. Samantha knew she couldn't just leave the house and claim mistreatment. She needed undeniable evidence. Evidence that would destroy every lie they had been spreading about her. So she began documenting everything. Every insult. Every manipulation. Every whisper of, "She's not good enough." Every time they blamed her for situations she didn't cause. She saved messages. Recorded conversations when she could. Kept notes detailing dates, times, and exact words. Not because she wanted to use them immediately, but because she knew that someday these people would try to twist the story against her, and that was the day she would use all of this. Every revenge story has someone who unintentionally plays a role in exposing the truth. For Samantha, that person was her neighbor Auntie Rahila, a gentle, kind woman in her late 50s who lived next door. She had seen enough through the thin walls and open courtyards to understand Samantha's pain. One afternoon, while Samantha was hanging clothes, Auntie Rahila walked over and said quietly, "Beta, you're a good girl. I've seen everything. If you ever need a witness, I'm here." Samantha's heart filled with warmth she hadn't felt in months. People forget this, but in every story of cruelty, there is always at least one person watching silently, waiting to support the victim. Samantha thanked her. She didn't ask for help yet, but she knew she might soon, and that reassurance strengthened her resolve. Every revenge has a spark, and Samantha's came one late evening when Daniel returned home in a foul mood. He had been drinking. He threw his keys on the table loudly. His mother rushed to him, complaining about Samantha again, how she didn't talk much now, how she acted different, how she wasn't obedient anymore. Daniel, frustrated and irritated, snapped. He stormed into Samantha's room, didn't knock, didn't calm himself, and yelled, "Why are you behaving like this? Why are you making things worse? Do you want problems?" His anger wasn't just loud. It was reckless. Samantha stood there, silent, watching him. For the first time, she wasn't scared. And that scared him. He shouted again, "Say something." She looked him straight in the eye and replied softly, "Daniel, I have already said everything I needed to say." Something about her tone, calm, steady, fearless, made him step back. For a moment, he wasn't the aggressor. He was the confused one. He muttered curses and walked out, slamming the door. That door slam was the final moment Samantha needed. She sat on her bed, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "It's time." Samantha's revenge wasn't going to be messy. It wasn't going to be impulsive. It was going to be intelligent. She had gathered evidence. She had found emotional strength. She had a witness. Now she needed a way to expose their cruelty publicly, so they could never twist the story. Her plan had 3 layers. Layer 1, leaving the house, not in tears, not in shame, not with accusations, but with dignity, and with their truth in her hands. Layer 2, revealing everything, to the families, to the community, to every person who believed Daniel and his mother were respectable. Once the truth came out, their reputations would crack like glass. Layer 3, legal power, because she wasn't leaving empty-handed. And she wasn't leaving quietly. She knew her rights. She knew the law protected women from mental abuse. She knew evidence was her shield, and she had plenty of it. The next morning, Samantha dressed neatly, packed her important documents, and placed them carefully in a small bag. Not hurriedly, not nervously, but with calm purpose. Daniel's mother noticed immediately. "Where are you going?" Samantha smiled softly. "To my mother's house." Daniel's mother scoffed. "You'll come back by evening." "You always do." But Samantha didn't reply. She walked out of the house slowly, without looking back. Not because she was scared, but because revenge tastes better when you leave them confused. She went straight to her family. She didn't dramatize anything. She didn't cry uncontrollably. She spoke in a calm, steady voice. She told them everything, showed them the recordings, the messages, the notes, every insult, every plan to get rid of her, every moment of emotional brutality. Her family sat in stunned silence. Her brother clenched his fists. Her father's eyes filled with tears. Her mother covered her mouth, heartbroken to hear the misery Samantha had been hiding. But they didn't try to send her back. Not this time. They said one thing: "Now we fight." And that was the beginning of a revenge so satisfying, so humiliating for the abusers, that the community would talk about it for months. Revenge doesn't always arrive with a scream. Sometimes it arrives wearing the calmest expression you've ever seen. And when Samantha returned to that house with her family behind her, she wasn't the same woman who once cried behind closed doors. She wasn't the quiet girl who apologized for things she didn't do. She wasn't the wife begging for respect. She was the storm they never saw coming. 3 days after leaving, Samantha walked back into her in-laws' home, not alone. Her brother walked beside her. Her father followed behind. Her mother stood strong and silent. The entire street watched. Neighbors peeked through windows. Doors opened halfway. People stood still, knowing something big had come. Samantha didn't look at the curious faces. She had only one destination: the truth. Daniel's mother opened the door first. Her shocked expression was almost comical. "You came back? Finally realized your mistake?" Samantha's father stepped forward before she could answer. "No," he said sharply. "We came so you can realize yours." Her mother-in-law froze. For the first time, she had no power in the room. Daniel walked in moments later, surprised and unprepared. He started speaking immediately. "Samantha, look, this drama isn't necessary." Her brother cut him off. "Drama? You think this is drama? You think treating our sister like trash is drama? You think planning to throw her out is drama?" Daniel swallowed hard. Samantha didn't speak yet. She placed her small bag on the table, opened it calmly, and one by one she laid out the evidence. Recordings of his mother calling her worthless. Voice notes of Daniel blaming her for everything. Screenshots of messages criticizing her, mocking her. Written logs of every insult, every manipulation. The room went silent. Daniel's mother's face turned pale. Daniel's jaw tightened. The neighbors gathered closer to windows. Because news travels fast in small communities. Samantha's voice was steady as she finally spoke. "I didn't come here to stay. I came here to show you who I really am. And what you've done to me." Her tone wasn't angry. It was powerful, strong, unshakable, and that scared them more than her tears ever could. Just when Daniel's mother tried to deny the evidence, the door opened. Auntie Rahila stepped inside. The mother-in-law's eyes widened in horror. Not her. Anyone but her. Because Auntie Rahila had heard everything for months, and she wasn't afraid to speak up. She stood beside Samantha and said loudly, "I have heard every cry, every insult, every fight through these walls. I have heard Samantha begging for peace while you broke her spirit. I am a witness." Neighbors outside gasped. Daniel's mother stumbled backward. Daniel's head dropped. Their lies had crumbled in front of everyone. Samantha's father took out the papers, legal documents, formal complaint forms, copies of the evidence. "Now," he said, "we will proceed legally. This is mental harassment, emotional abuse, a violation of her rights." Daniel panicked. "Samantha, wait, let's talk." Her brother's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You had years to talk. Now you can deal with the consequences." Daniel's mother tried to speak, but Samantha finally raised her hand. A simple gesture, but powerful enough to silence the woman who had tormented her. Samantha said, "I begged for respect. You gave me insults. I asked for kindness. You gave me cruelty. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. But now the silence is over." Her words were soft, but they hit harder than any scream. By now, neighbors had fully stepped out of their homes. Some stood in the courtyard. Some whispered among themselves, "Look what they did to her. She was such a sweet girl. I always knew something was wrong in that house." Reputation. That was Daniel's mother's pride. And Samantha destroyed it with truth alone. Not lies. Not character assassination. Just truth. Daniel's mother tried to push past the crowd, yelling, "She's lying. This is all exaggerated." She was the problem. Auntie Rahila shut her down instantly. "Respect yourself and stop lying. Everyone has seen your behavior for years." The entire neighborhood agreed. Daniel's mother's face burned with humiliation. Daniel looked powerless. Their world, their pride, their reputation, their lies collapsed in front of dozens of eyes. Samantha had done it. She had defeated them in the one place they cared about most, public honor. Samantha picked up her bag. She didn't take anything that wasn't hers. She didn't beg for belongings. She didn't look at the house one last time. She simply said, "I'm done," and walked away. Not with tears, but with dignity. Her family followed her. Neighbors stepped aside, watching her like she was walking out of a battlefield victorious. Daniel called out desperately, "Samantha, wait." But she didn't stop, because when someone destroys your spirit, they don't deserve your footsteps anymore. Within days, the entire area knew the truth. People began avoiding Daniel's mother. Women whispered about her cruelty. Men criticized Daniel for being weak and disrespectful. Old relationships faded. New gossip spread. Their reputation collapsed. The one thing they valued, the respect of society, was gone forever. And Samantha? Her story became an inspiration. Women admired her courage. Elders prayed for her strength. Families supported her. She was no longer the girl who suffered quietly. She became the girl who stood up for herself. Weeks later, Samantha sat in her parents' home, sunlight touching her face, her heart finally peaceful. She was free from cruelty, from manipulation, from emotional torture, from loneliness inside a marriage that never had love. She rebuilt her confidence. She rebuilt her dreams. She rebuilt herself. And in that rebirth, her revenge was complete. Not just because they were humiliated, not just because the community turned against them, but because she got her life back. She won. Without violence, without lies, without becoming like them. She won by becoming stronger. And that is the sweetest revenge of all. The next morning felt unreal. The sun was rising outside my window, painting the curtains a soft orange. But inside my head, everything was still echoing with last night's events. For a good 5 minutes, I just sat there on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, replaying every detail over and over. The screaming, the panic, the desperation in their voices, and the cold, stone-solid truth appearing in front of everyone that they had lied, cheated, manipulated, and nearly destroyed my life. I knew today was going to change everything. I just didn't realize how much. Around 10:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. Not once, not twice, but 3 sharp official knocks. I opened the door, and 2 officers were standing there, the same ones from last night. "Good morning," one said. "We need a follow-up statement." A few things were interesting. Yeah, that was one word for it. I invited them in, and they sat down, pulling out their notebooks. Officer number 1 leaned forward. So we looked into Mark, Jenna, and Lisa. My heart froze. And? He sighed. "There's a lot. More than we expected." He explained. Mark had been reported twice before for workplace harassment, but the complaints were lost. Jenna had a history of fabricating social problems to create drama in friend groups. Lisa had a restraining order filed years ago for stalking an ex. All 3 had patterns, and all 3 had lied last night. Then he dropped the real bomb. They contradicted each other so badly, the officer said, that it was obvious they planned something, but didn't plan the details well enough. I didn't even have to explain much. Their lies had defeated them before the investigation even started. Then he said the line that still sticks with me. Honestly, your evidence was too solid. Their plan collapsed the second you played those recordings. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Apparently, my friends had no idea how serious filing false accusations was until they were sitting in the interrogation room realizing this wasn't a social game. This was the actual legal system. The officers listed the pending charges: filing a false police report, conspiracy to defame, attempted coercion, harassment, public endangerment, because their fight last night nearly caused injuries, and a few more I didn't even recognize. The officer closed his notebook and stood. We'll keep you updated. But between us, you're going to be absolutely fine. They're the ones in deep trouble. For the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest lifted. I expected this. Toxic people always stay loyal until they're in trouble. The police told me later. Mark blamed Jenna. Jenna blamed Lisa. Lisa blamed everyone but herself. Their friendship disintegrated instantly. Every lie they had ever told came pouring out like dirty water. They exposed each other so badly that the police didn't even have to dig. The evidence came flying straight from their own mouths. By day 3, I got the update. All 3 accepted plea deals. They admitted they lied. They admitted they tried to frame me. They admitted they wanted to ruin my life. Justice finally snapped into place. Guess what? The video of his meltdown, the one where he screamed like a maniac, went viral in the office group chats. He tried to deny everything, but HR already had the police report. He was terminated for violating conduct rules, harassment, creating a hostile environment. He sent me a long message blaming me for destroying his career. I didn't respond. He destroyed it all on his own. Her entire reputation, the one she polished like a trophy, shattered overnight. Her lies were exposed. Her manipulations were exposed. Her perfect image collapsed. Friends stopped inviting her. People whispered about her everywhere she went. She tried to apologize to me twice, but I didn't even open her messages. Some apologies are just another form of manipulation. Her situation was bad. She'd already had a restraining order in the past. This new case pushed her past her limit. She packed her things and left the city. No goodbye. No explanation. Just disappeared. Honestly, good. Peace tastes better when the chaos leaves. About a month later, the police called me once more. All charges resolved, they said. You're fully cleared. You have nothing to worry about. And then the officer added something quietly. You handled this situation better than most people could. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt free. Like the air was finally breathable again. Like the chapter had finally closed. Like I could finally move forward. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to remember something important. Sometimes the people who smile with you, laugh with you, spend time with you, are the same people who secretly hope to see you fall. The world isn't always kind, but the truth always wins, even if it takes time. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever been lied about, if someone ever tried to ruin your life, just know this: you are stronger than they ever expected, and you will survive things that were meant to break you. If you enjoyed this story, if you want more stories like this, And if you believe justice should always win, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we bring you real stories. Stories of revenge, stories of survival, and stories where the truth finally rises. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one.